Peace and yeah. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach enlightenment. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach enlightenment. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach enlightenment. To the Guru I go for refuge, to the Buddha I go for refuge, to the Dharma I go for refuge, to the Sangha I go for refuge. To the Guru I go for refuge, to the Buddha I go for refuge, to the Dharma I go for refuge, to the Sangha I go for refuge. To the Guru I go for refuge, to the Buddha I go for refuge, to the Sangha I go for refuge, to the Sangha I go for refuge. Teacher, void destroyer, thus born, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, want to please knower of the worlds, all beings to be tamed, Supreme One, teacher of all gods and man, Buddha, void destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings and go for refuge. Teacher, void destroyer, thus born, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helpsman all beings to be tamed, Supreme One, teacher of all gods and man, Buddha, void destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings and go for refuge. Teacher, void destroyer, thus gone fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the worlds, helpsman all beings to be tamed, Supreme One, teacher of all gods and man, Buddha, voice to destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings and go for refuge. When you Chibo were born, you took 7 steps on this great earth and you said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise at that time, I pay homage. Completely pure body, supremely fine form, ocean of wisdom like a golden mountain, famed paradise in the 3 worlds, supreme protector, to you I pay homage. Endowed with a supreme mass, a face like a stainless moon, a color like gold, to you I pay homage. The 3 worlds are not like you, who is free of dust, matchless one, endowed with knowledge, to you I pay homage. Protector, endowed with great compassion, omniscient teacher, feel of ocean like merits and good qualities, to the dust born I pay homage. Through purity, free from attachment, through virtue released from the evil gunglings, unique, supreme, ultimate meaning, to the Dharma that brings peace I pay homage. From freedom teaching the path, well abiding in the pure trainings, wholly filled endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha also I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, accumulate virtue and goodness, subdue your own mind, this is the teaching of the Buddha. Like a star, a mirage, illusion, drops of dew, bubbles, streams, lightning in the clouds, look at all countries' phenomena as such. To you this merits, having attained the state of all seeing, and thereby subduing the enemy of force, may I liberate Margaretes from the ocean of existence, stirred by the wages of aging, sickness, and death. I pray to the chief of the Shakyas, whose body was formed by 10 million perfect virtues, whose speech fulfilled the hopes of limitless beings, whose mind sees precisely all objects of knowledge. Tiyata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yasoha. Tiyata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yasoha. Tiyata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yasoha. We now reach mindfulness of the bodhicitta, right? So now we reach the second stanza. It says, within the prison of suffering in samsara, that is without end, the 6 classes of beings wander, bereft of happiness. Your very own parents who nurture you with such care right there, abandoning attachment and aversion, meditate on cherishing others and compassion, without allowing the mind to wander, remain in a state of compassion, without losing mindfulness, remain in a state of compassion. right? So within the state, within the prison of suffering in samsara, that is without end, right? So that means, first verse, within the prison of suffering in samsara, that is without end. What is so? That means the 6 classes of beings wander, buried of happiness, in the prison of suffering in samsara. Now, here we have to understand what is meant by samsara. Right? What is samsara? Here, some understood the meaning of samsara like, this world, our own place, impure realm, impure place is the samsara. But actually this is not the samsara. When Buddhism talks about samsara, then there is much deeper samsara, much deeper. So samsara is not a place, it's not a country, right? It's not a place. Here, the samsara is, we called, samsara is kind of, the continuity of our physical form, right? Within us, there is a continuity of our physical form, the tendency to take rebirth, karmic rebirth, through rebirth by the force of karma and afflictions, again and again, again and again. There is a kind of continuity within each of us, So this is the real samsara. And that continuity of physical form has no ending. Unless we cut it, unless we apply the wisdom, unless we totally cut it, then there is no end. There is no end. That is the real samsara. Right. And then this so-called the continuity of physical form is like a prison. It's a pure prison. Because why it is a pure prison is because it is produced by karma and afflictions, karma and negative emotions. It is produced by karma and afflictions. Whatever is produced by karma and afflictions by nature is suffering, is dissatisfaction. So then it says this prison of some suffering in samsara, in this within our continuity of our physical form, there is a prison, and that prison by nature is suffering because it is produced by karma and afflictions. Now, what kind of suffering, right? What kind of suffering is? There are 16 different types of suffering, and also there are 8 different types of suffering, and there are 6 different types of suffering, and then there are 3 different types of suffering. But mainly there are only 3 different types of suffering. Now in the case of 4 different types of suffering, we have now of course for the individual case, in one's individual case, there is a suffering of birth, and then the suffering of the suffering of sickness, the suffering of old age, and the suffering of death finally. So this is individual suffering. Again, there is a suffering, these are called as the suffering of uncertainty. and then the suffering of dissatisfaction, and the suffering of having to take rebirth, karmic rebirth again and again, forth. And then there is a suffering of what is called as suffering of loneliness.
Suffering of
loneliness.
Loneliness. Oh, loneliness. Oh.
Right. Now the first one is the suffering of what is called as the suffering of uncertainty. That suffering relates to friends and enemy. There is no certainty that once we are friends, we will be friends forever, whole lifetime. There is no guarantee. Once we are enemy, there is no guarantee that we will remain as an enemy forever. For example, last year, we are friends. Next year, we become enemy. Right? So like this, even let alone, the friends, even within the, kind of relatives, this happens, because there are cases that, relatives that, killed. So like this. And then, so this kind of suffering, this kind of suffering. And then the second, the suffering also relates to the resources, wealth. That is, for example, in the last year, one's economic condition is good, but this year falls down. This is again the perfect example that economic resources will never remain permanent. In the early part of one's life, economic resources good, very well off, but then we cannot guarantee that whole life it will remain as same. It will fall, So that is the second matter, the suffering of uncertainty. There is no certainty. We cannot guarantee what will happen. And then the suffering of dissatisfaction. The suffering of dissatisfaction or unsatisfactory, or what is called a discontentment. That means we are not contented with what we have, so we still want to have more. Like this. Relating to this, there is a one, in India there was a one king, So at the same time there was a beggar, a beggar. So then, the king was not, not satisfied with all the material resources, with all the, servants, with all the good facilities that the king, has. He's not satisfied, So he wants to have more, still, rule more kingdom, extend his kingdom to accumulate more things. Then he met with one beggar. The beggar told him, if I have, if I got all the, treasures, a lot of treasures, I would give it to you. The king was surprised. What you have to give me? Because you yourself are poor from the beginning, poor by birth. So, the beggar insists, he would like to give it to you. All the resources, if he found something, a lot of, treasures. In that case, he say, materially, you are not poor. I know, the beggar says. You are well off. There's no doubt. There's no question. But then, mentally, you are very poor. So I would like to give it to all my resources to you. because you are mentally you are never satisfied. So this is second type of suffering, the suffering of discontentment. You always wanted to so this is also one of the one source of another problem. In one's this is practical. In one's daily life. Very practical. Then the suffering of uncertainty, right? The first, and then suffering of discontentment, and then the suffering of having to take rebirth again and again. This year we have one body, we take one body. Next year, not next year, next life we take another body, and then next life another body, because the very nature of the samsara. What is the nature of the samsara? The very nature of the samsara is such that where there is birth, the death follows. Where there is accumulation, there is a loss finally. Where there is a companion or friend, there is separation. So this is the nature. So having to take rebirth again, and we cannot expect that we will not die. Our body will remain forever. Finally, we have to bid a farewell to this world and take another body. When we take another life, we should have another body, right? Except in the formless lamb, you don't need this, physical form. Otherwise, in desired lamb and formed lamb, you have to take one's body fresh again and again. It is like changing clothes, one cloth, you take another one, so like this. And then the suffering of loneliness. When we take a birth, when we are born alone. Nobody will come together with you to take a birth together with you, with oneself. And then when we die, we also have to die alone. Although while we are alive, we are, surrounded by friends, we are surrounded by family members, and we are surrounded by, one's, companionship. But then at the time of death, one has to travel alone, one has to go alone. Even the pain, whether it is physical pain or mental pain, nobody comes to share this pain with oneself, right? So there is a sense of loneliness. Most strangely is that people face the sense of loneliness, even if that one is living in the city where the population comes to millions, still sense of loneliness. Whereas in the mountains, some hermits, they spend years and years, decades and decades, but they don't feel any sense of loneliness. They always feel connected to the society and all the sentient beings. So again, it has to do with this, It has to do with the heart. So these four kinds of suffering. And then there are, limited suffering. And then the one important, if we bring together all the suffering, then mainly there are three kinds of suffering. This is very important, to understand. Suffering of suffering. When it comes to now, there are three kinds of suffering. First, the suffering of suffering. When it comes to the suffering of suffering, not human being, even the animals try to avoid. Even animals try their best to separate from the suffering of suffering, because right. And then there is a changeable suffering. Only in the human society, now that there is a suffering of change. Animals cannot, try to separate from the suffering of change. Only the humans do. So, because normally, usually what we do consider as suffering, what we do consider as pleasurable experiences, are in nature is suffering, right? Now, for example, what is the suffering of the changeable suffering is, for example, first, we enjoy some food, right? Very good food. But then, in the food, although we enjoy food, but then there is the food can be salty, and the food a lot of oil. While eating, we enjoy, but then too much oil disturb, it affects our health. And then after one's stomach is full, after some time you get headache. This first we experience happiness, and then in the second moment it changes to suffering. We get headache. And then we go to swimming. First, the weather is very hot. We go to swimming. First few moments we enjoy, but then too much swimming no good. Then we go and get try to sunshine. And then once the skin gets dark, too much exposed to sunshine. Like this. So not only this, there are many things, many things. So another more important thing is now, in this, we need to be very, how to say, we need to put a little, analytical meditation. For example, now what happens is, not in every, what we consider as pleasurable things, For example, food, First we eat food, right? While we eat food, we enjoy, we get some, pleasurable experience. That is what is called as sensorial pleasure. Sensorial pleasure. But in reality, in deep down, what happens is, we develop the craving for the food, craving for the pleasurable experiences of the food, pleasurable experience. And now, what does this craving function? Because we crave for this pleasurable experience, now we do not want to separate from these pleasurable experiences. This craving imprints, leaves the imprints. What? Right? Imprints. Now, next time, when we eat the same food, become crave, more crave. It continues, do like this. Similarly, we eat, what happens is, similarly, when we eat, not much tasty food, a bad, taste food. Now, when we eat, we don't feel like eating. Now we begin to develop a craving. Now this, what kind of craving? The craving of separating from the unpleasurable experience of the food. Unpleasurable experience of food. Now write this. Now again, when we have to eat the same food, we begin to dislike. So we begin to dislike, and this disliking is what is called a mental discomfort. Mental discomfort, right? So it is included in the negative emotion. The definition of negative emotion is such that the mere occurrence of within oneself creates internal disturbance. It makes one's mind unhappy. The purpose of life is happy. Like this. So this is the nature of the changeable suffering. Now the final one. Now in this the changeable suffering, now only those hermit people do, because they are exposed to. Now if we again do some analytical meditation, there's so much, how to say, so much exposure to the material, facilities, so much exposure to material facilities. So once one is tired, one feels tired of this, material exposure, too much material exposure, and then one is seeking some deep mental peace, some form of mental peace, much the peace more profound than the external things. So finally, they try to stop all these things by doing meditation. And then they go to the mountains, a mountainous area to do this kind of meditation. This one. Now the third level of suffering, the second level of suffering, even the non-Buddhists can do. Even the non-Buddhists can do. Right? Now the third level of suffering, that is unique to only Buddhism. Nobody talking about this third level of suffering. This is what is the third level of suffering called pervasive suffering or conditioning suffering. This is the most deepest one. It's very difficult to identify. Difficult to identify. Buddha taught, because of the truth of the suffering, Buddha taught, meditate on the suffering. When Buddha taught, meditate on the suffering, he is not talking about the suffering of suffering. He is not talking about the changeable suffering. Now he principally talking about the third level of suffering. Meditate on the third level of the suffering. Right. Now what is the third level of suffering? What is the definition and what is the nature of the third level of the suffering? That is conditional suffering. This right, conditional suffering. This third level of the suffering is, we can take 5 aggregates. We have physical aggregate, feeling, composition, discrimination, and then the mental aggregate. There are 5. So all these 5 aggregates are the example of the conditioning suffering. Because what is meant by conditioning, or what is meant by pervasive, sometimes it is called as pervasive suffering, because this very suffering, conditioning suffering that we have, is pervaded to the 3 realm: form realm, formless realm, and desire realm. Because we have this physical body, we have this conditioning suffering as a physical body that serve as the basis, they serve as the foundation for inviting other two suffering and changeable suffering. Without our physical body, suffering won't take place. Suffering cannot take place. Changeable suffering also cannot take place. But because we hold this body, aggregate, and then other two suffering starts. Also, again, if we really try to understand and try to practice Hinayana practice as well as Mahayana practice as well as Vajrayana practice, this is the bottom line. This is the main practice. Main practice. Identifying and recognizing this, pervasive suffering, conditioning suffering. Now let us see. Mahayana talks about cultivating bodhicitta for the benefit of entire sentient being, right? And then Hinayana also, the principal teaching of the Hinayana is stress on the cultivation of the renunciation, a sense of renunciation. How can we develop a sense of renunciation? How can we develop an infinite compassion towards, compassion of bodhicitta towards the entire sentient beings. When we see the homeless people, when we see somebody who really need the care, who really need some kind of medical aid, or we simply develop compassion, we are able to develop compassion. On the other hand, when we see a very rich person, very wealth, the person with name and fame and everything running very well, we don't develop compassion, right? No, what is missing? What is missing? Because we are not able to identify the conditioning suffering. Conditioning suffering. We are not able to identify conditional suffering. Therefore, in the text, Buddhist text, in the many practical Buddhist texts, it says, by understanding the suffering of others, you develop compassion. By understanding the suffering of yourself, you develop a sense of renunciation. So this suffering is none other than the conditional suffering. Conditional suffering. By understanding the conditional suffering of other people, you develop compassion. Compassion is the basis for cultivating the bodhicitta. And by understanding and recognizing the conditional suffering yourself, you develop a sense of renunciation. So it is the conditional suffering. Yet, it is difficult to identify conditioning suffering as a conditioning suffering. Suffering as a suffering. Conditioning suffering as suffering. Very difficult, Once we are able to identify the conditioning suffering, then it becomes, it is now the point where we can, begin to make a spiritual journey smooth. Begin to make a spiritual journey smooth. So long as we are not, this really very, very relevant in the Kyutubje, the great one of the one of the heart spiritual son of Tsongkhapa, in his commentary, one of the commentary, he say, if one claim to be a Mahayana practitioner and then try to be compassionate, try to travel through the spiritual path, without fundamentally understanding the conditioning suffering, he say then everything looks like lip service, because you haven't deepened, you haven't laid the concrete foundation. If you really want to travel through the spiritual path smoothly, it becomes very important to cultivate compassion. In order to cultivate the compassion, conditioning suffering is the basis. Without conditioning suffering, no matter how profound Vajrayana teachings we practice, it's quite difficult. Not that effective. Not that effective. So it becomes, now, based on the conditioning suffering, how much you suffer by the conditioning suffering, how much one is tormented by the conditioning suffering. If your understanding, and if your understanding of the being tormented by conditioning suffering is, say, 50%, you really develop a sense of renunciation. 50%. At the same time, if you are able to think about the suffering of others in the conditioning, through the pervasive suffering, then you are able to also develop the 50%. So much depends on how much we understand and how much we practice, meditate on the conditioning suffering. So conditioning suffering is very important, very important. If one really were to make to make some change, some transformation, conditioning suffering is the basis. So otherwise we will sometimes find, in that teaching, the different kinds of suffering, talking about suffering. Of course, this physical suffering, and then there are other kinds of suffering which help us to develop a sense of renunciation, which help us to develop compassion, like this. But not the fundamental, the main cause. The main cause is conditioning suffering. Within the prison of suffering in samsara, that is without end. It says that is without end suffering. Now the question is, can we make an end to the samsara? It says in the text, it says, in general, we cannot make an end to the suffering. We cannot make an end to the samsara. But individually, we can make an end to the samsara. Because if we are, as discussed before, if we are able to cut off, if we are able to cut off the continuity of the physical form, then we don't have to take a birth in samsara through karma and affliction. Karma affliction. So that is the point. So that is the point, that we can make an end to samsara individually. But in general, it's very difficult. So that's why it says, sentient beings can, enlightenment is achievable. Enlightenment is achievable. But enlightenment is achievable for all the sentient beings. But we cannot say all the sentient beings can achieve enlightenment. Because as long as we do not make any effort, we heard the teachings, we heard just the teachings, and then if we do not make any effort in contemplation, reflection and meditation, enlightenment cannot be possible. And yet on the other hand, if we were to make effort, if we were to make an effort, developing our wisdom through hearing, through reflection and through meditation, then it becomes possible. Enlightenment is achievable for one's individual case. Right? So this. So this is the first explanation. Within the prison of suffering in samsara, that is without end. Samsara is no individually we can make, So there again, whether the samsara is, has end or no end, a lot of discussion in, philosophical texts, in monastic syllabus. I don't go into detail about this. And then the 6 classes of beings wander bereft of happiness. Bereft of happiness. The 6 bereft, can you see?
Bereft of happiness.
Yeah, bereft of happiness. That means the 6 types of beings wander, lack of happiness.
6 classes.
Why? The 6 classes of beings wander, lack of happiness. Why? And then when we talk about happiness, there are 2 kinds of happiness. One is sensorial happiness and one is mental happiness. Right? One is sensorial happiness and one is mental happiness. Now, in order to achieve the sensorial happiness, again, again we need to put in, it requires some, effort, right? It requires effort. Because the purpose of life is happiness, to achieve happiness, right? The purpose of life is to achieve happiness. Now, for example, we we walk, we make we make the survival of our everyday life. We make the survival of our everyday life. Mainly, finally, is to achieve happiness. Is to achieve happiness, right? All the material resources are for happiness, are for achieving happiness. Now, physical facilities, material facilities, no doubt provide us physical comfort, that is sensorial happiness, sensorial related happiness. But now, much more deeper than this sensorial happiness is the mental happiness. Now, mental happiness becomes very, very important. Very important. Now, how to achieve mental happiness? Again, now that is the question. Can material resources, material facilities provide no question, provide physical well-being, physical happiness, but can it provide mental happiness too? That is question, right? So based on understanding, based on understanding and based on many experience, material resources fails to provide internal happiness. Why? Because when we talk about the mental happiness, it is not like ready-made. It is not a ready-made. It can be cultivated, mental joy can be cultivated only through mental training. Only through mental training. Right? Now, for example, like say wisdom, say compassion, say like contentment, all the positive, positive thoughts, all this, will not come, of its own. We need to go through the training of these positive thoughts, and it is only through, gaining access to these positive thoughts that we then able to remain calm and we able to cultivate the peace of mind, the joyful mental state. Right? That's why lack of happiness, that's why there's being 6 classes of beings wander bereft of happiness, lack of happiness, is because the master, the great Indian Buddhist master, 6th century, I think 8th century, the great Indian Buddhist master, Nalendra master, Shantideva said, this jigden dewa jingeba tekyun shime dole chung jigden kuba jingya jigden dungye jingeba tekyun dade dole chung. All the happiness in this world comes from cherishing others. All the miserable and suffering comes from cherishing oneself. So if you do the opposite way, then this comes lack of happiness. And also, he goes on to say, Master Shantideva goes on to say, he said, although people want happiness, but they destroy the cause of happiness, like destroying their own enemy. Although people do not want suffering, but they run after the suffering. Sentient beings are bereft of happiness. Lack of happiness.
Yes, actually, is very critical to meditate on the suffering.
That's right, critical to meditate.
Very, very critical.
Yeah. Now finally comes to this, people want happiness, but they do not. They destroy their own happiness, like they're destroying their enemy. Do not want suffering, but they run after the suffering. So now the final cause. What is the final cause? What makes all this happen is finally it's the craving. Again, when we talk about the functioning of craving, now it is very well detailed, explained in the Four Noble Truth. In order, even now, almost everything, craving is involved, extensively. Not alone, in everything. Even the next life, we have no control of what kind of rebirth we are going to take. We have no control over what kind of rebirth take. Right? Now, at the time of death, for example, at the time of death, karma alone do nothing. If we have no craving, although we do have karma, we have created the karma to take a rebirth in the next life. But then, even the karma that we have, if the craving is missing, we will not be able to take rebirth next life. But now, what is the, instrumental force? What is the primary force for taking rebirth? Is again craving. Because there is a karma, we created karma, and then this craving, is like, seed, seed, we put the flower, we put the water, we water, and then the plants grow slowly. Similarly, in order to activate this karmic seed, you need the factor to activate, to make it function. Now, what is the condition that makes this karma function? Is craving. Craving makes. That's why, if you look at the 12 links of the dependent origination, how the laws, the ninth link is the craving. And then the 10 is the becoming. And then the what? And then the 11 is the samsara. The 6 classes of being wonder, bereft of happiness. Your very own parents who nurtured you with such care, right there. It is right there, it says, the text says. Your very own parents. Now, yeah.
What are those 6 types of beings?
Yeah, that's right. 6 realms of samsara. That's right. Now it says, sentient beings are, the samsara. It talks about, now the sentient beings are suffering. Suffering, tormented by the suffering, different types of suffering, and especially the conditioning suffering, pervasive suffering. Now, having said about the having said about the sentient beings suffering tremendously, terribly, now what we can do? Now the question comes, what we can do? Can I have the responsibility to make some changes, to bring some benefit to these suffering sentient beings? Am I shouldered with this responsibility to save or protect beings from the suffering, 6 classes of beings from the suffering? Now the issue of bodhicitta comes. Because we are talking about the second level, the mindfulness of the bodhicitta comes. Right. Now, if you are shouldered, why I have to help, why I need to help sentient beings who are in the mud of suffering, who are experienced in the mud of suffering. Now it says you have to help. You owe to help. You owe to help. You need to help. Because the question is, because here your very own parents. That means all the sentient beings, 6 classes of sentient beings, has been one's mother since beginningless lifetime. Therefore, it is one's responsibility to connect with them and to help them. In what ways can we help them? Through what ways can we help them? By providing the material facilities, of course, very good, of course, but it's very limited. We can only do in human form, right? We cannot practice in hell. And hungry ghosts, we cannot see. God also we cannot see. We cannot gain access to them. So if we were to really help them, if we were really to connect with them, now the solution is by developing bodhicitta, by cultivating compassion. Says, your own very parents who nurtured you with such care, right there. Now it talks about the cultivation of bodhicitta. Abandoning attachment and aversion, meditate on cherishing others and compassion. Without allowing the mind to wander, remain in the state of compassion. Now let me talk, we discuss about this compassion, right? Now there are limitless sentient beings over there. There are so many limited sentient beings suffering one after another, and different forms of suffering, different form of suffering. Now it says, you need to help them. You need to help them. In order to help them, the best way to helping them is by cultivating the compassion, cultivating the bodhicitta. It talks, right? It talks. Now, if we were to cultivate the bodhicitta, how do we train? We discuss, because bodhicitta is not a ready-made. Bodhicitta mental state is not a ready-made. We need to make an effort. We need to make an effort. If we were to make effort, now how do we make an effort? That is the question. Now, in order to cultivate bodhicitta, now effort is necessary. What kind of effort? Now training in the 7-fold cause and effect precepts. That is the instructions for developing bodhicitta. One is this, another one is equalizing self and others. There are 2 instructions. Both begin from one from Manjushri and one from wisdom. One from Manjushri and one from Buddha Matriya. In the Buddha Matriya's case, the lineage is what is called as 7-fold cause and effect precepts. Manjushri's case, equalizing self and others. instructions. There comes to two different lineage. In training one's mind, in cultivating the bodhicitta mind. So now this one is talking about sevenfold cause and effect. Right? In order to develop bodhicitta, there are 7 steps that one need to train in. The first one is now recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother in past life, in beginner's lifetime. Now, right? Recognizing all sentient beings as one's past life. Now, what it has to do with, recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother in one's past life? This alone will not, directly connect with the sentient beings. This alone, we understand, right? This alone. Now, in order to develop this sense of, all sentient beings has been one's mother. Now, in order to do that, we need to visualize. We need to, do one kind of meditation. There comes one kind of meditation. One visualize 3 different person, because recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother is pretty difficult to do. Because without prior training, what is the prior training? Now the training of visualizing the 3 different persons. One's enemy, to whom you don't dislike. One is one's close one, very dear, friend or whatever relative. One is neutral person. There are 3 persons, right? We need to make the equal. First, now, normally what happens is, there are 3 people, if there are 3 people, all these 3 people need the help of yours, need your help. Now, without much investigation, without much thinking, instantly, if you were to help, definitely you would help the one whom you feel close. No doubt. There is no doubt. No question. And then you don't like to help the enemy. And then the neutral person, you feel indifference. Right? Now, this is the nature, this is the nature. Now, if we, make a close examination, now if we check, why you are helping for someone whom you feel very close, you are helping. Why you don't want to help for the enemy? Why you feel neutral to the neutral person, equanimity feeling to the neutral person? Now, if you try to analyze, if you try to check the reason, we will find the close one, you like to help is because temporarily or for the time being, that person helps you either physically, either verbally, or either mentally. In either way, help. So you want to help. For the enemy either physically, verbally, or mentally harm you, so you don't want to help. So this is the ultimate reason. If you try to analyze, right? Now we need to get rid of this kind of thinking, and we need to make our mind equanimity for all these beings. How to do this? Right? Now how to do this is now we have to understand all these, first we have to understand all these sentient beings has been one's mother. In order to understand this, you need to prove the past life. just having a faith, not very, powerful impact, powerful effect. Just, believing, not powerful effect. Only thing is, now use the logic and reason. In the second chapter of establishing Buddha as a valid teacher, in his in Dharmakirti's work, in the Dignath, in the great Indian master Buddhist Narendra Master Dharmakirti, in Dignath's work, much has been explained, proving the existence of the past life. Right. So now we need a critical logic and reason to prove the existence of the past life. Once past life is established, future life you can establish easily.
Yes.
First, the important thing is to establish the past life. So in order to establish the past life does exist, you need to, faith alone is not enough. We need logic and reason to prove. Need a pure logic and reason to prove. There are many logic that Dharmakirti used. And even, some argument come, Then it says, about what we discussed before, mental joy is the most supreme. All this proof in this text, how mental joy is more superior than the physical, sensorial pleasures. All this proof, when you can make the 50% transformation at the mental level, you can also make the physical 50% transformation at the physical level too. When you make the 50% physical transformation, it cannot guarantee that you can make the 50% change in the mind level. Like this. So there are a lot of logic and reasons to prove that about the existence of the past life. And also, now the most detailed explanation about the proving the existence of the past life is, now the question comes, whether we believe there is a more subtle mind than our present moment of mind. In our waking state, in our 24 hours, the waking state, our mind is very, gross. We have gross state of mind. Now, when we go into sleep, especially dreaming, the mind becomes little grosser. And when we in the sleep, mind goes much, subtler. And then when during the fand, and then fanting, then mind becomes much subtler. And then at the time of death, the most subtle mind. So this comes, the subtlety of the mind, whether we believe in the subtlety of the mind. Once we believe in the subtlety of the mind, what is, we all know the clear light of death, the basis mind, the basis clear light. So the basis clear light mind is the foundation for the next life. It's the foundation of the next life. Without, a very subtle mind, we cannot, prove the next life. So it is a very subtle mind which goes to the next life. With the fuller understanding and fuller knowledge of, how, death process goes. Now, if we have the very clear understanding, explanation of how we die, then we prove there is next life. There are eight dissolution, external dissolution, internal dissolution, eight external dissolution and the internal dissolution. And then we also, one of the most important things is that those people, I think you heard, those people in the meditation took them, those, in Tibetan community, some great masters, they die, then, their body remain very fresh with lustrous on your face. Or death, heartbeat already stop, blood circulation already stop. Clinically announced death, complete death. But then body remain, body fresh. Why it happens? Unless we accept clear-light mind, very difficult to explain. There's no explanation in scientific world. So about many great masters, So in Dharamsala, some great, I think 102 Gandhian throne holder. I think 100 Gandhian throne holder. He remained for almost less than 1 week, almost less than 1 month, almost 3 or 4 weeks. He remained in meditation, Thukam meditation. Clinical death. And then some, scientists, some Western scientists go there to, under the guidance, under the instructions of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they want to check, what they want to check, how it works. But they have no clue. Mind itself is very subtle, We are talking about the clear light mind. So like this. So now go back to the earlier story. It's a clear light. So you need to prove the past life. So once the past life is proven, now then you can easily it becomes very easy for one to cultivate that recognizing for have the equanimity feeling to these 3 persons: enemy, neutral, and one's close friend, close one. Because now for the enemy, first we go to neutral person, because enemy right from the beginning very difficult. Because the moment we get enemy, there's volcano eruption. Right? So then we first, as a easy step, we first visualize the neutral person, because you feel equanimity, no hatred feeling. So then this neutral person, while we feel different, then that just like one's mother in this present life, in this very present life, how much this mother extended or provided the help, both in many ways. In many ways, this present mother provided the best of the help. Even in some cases, risk her life for one's own interest. The same thing, the same neutral person has been in many lifetimes done the same thing, just like one's present mother. So you develop some equanimity, and then we move to the in this one enemy. Now, because of certain kind of behavior or conduct, certain for very trivial issue, for very small matter, becomes enemy. But then, while this person has been our mother in many beginningless lifetime, the same present mother, just as the same present mother extended the best of the help in her own best capacity, this has been done by the enemy. Small matter make enemy, but on the other hand, provided a tremendous help while being as one's mother, And then this one thing. Another thing is, who make the guarantee, the same person, enemy, we call as enemy, for the time being become enemy, but who knows, this person can become the best of the friend most close one. For the time being, enemy, but in the future, we can become the best, and everything is possible. Can become the best of the friend. That person can become the most admirer of oneself. The best, helper and best, beneficiary. And then now you develop some closeness or some kind of this, the strong feeling gone, hatred feeling gone. Now you adopt the equanimity feeling. The same this one, your close one. Again, why we are too close, you feel too close, and also there is no guarantee that for the time being the person you feel so close. But who knows, that person again can become the one's enemy. So with this kind of thinking, we create an equanimity feeling for these three persons. Once we are able to create the equanimity of this feeling, now move to the second step, that is all the sentient beings as having been one's mother. Now this way it becomes very easy. Now become easy because you have let the equanimity feeling for all these three people. Right? So it becomes very easy. Choji, the Adisha Dibungara, he says when he trained in this, bodhicitta training, he followed these 7 steps and just, recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother. He said it took him 7 years to train. It took him 7 years to train in recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother. This alone practice took him 7 years. But once he developed this, because he laid the foundation, then other things very easy to go. Then you
Continue
yeah.
question later.
Then comes, Marshi Tinde. Then remembering the kindness. Marshi Tinde, remembering the kindness. How do we remember the kindness? So now, we consider, the mother take care of, the small kid with all the, right from the, milking, so that we all know this. How mother taking the same sentient beings done in the past. So, remember the kindness, right? And then, some, remember the kindness, remembering the kindness. So all this, material, the happiness, the what we call as happiness, this world, all provided by one's mother in many different ways, even at the cost of risking her life, So the same mother did, all the same things did in the past, Now, Marshal, and then finally repaying the kindness. How do we repay the kindness, So that is the question. Again, I say, of course, by, providing material resources, by providing all the help in one's best capacity, wonderful, But then, in the human realm, we can provide the material resources, we can provide, health, help in different ways. But this cannot, in one's best capacity, this is very wonderful. One need to do. But then, in order to expand, now the expansion can be only possible by developing bodhicitta mind. Bodhicitta, right? So repaying the kindness. How can we liberate or protect sentient beings from the suffering? But the worst form of suffering is mental suffering, conditioning suffering. We need to get rid of the conditioning suffering of all the sentient beings. In order to do that, we have no capacity now. we cannot do, because we ourselves is under the suffering. How can we help? If we were to help, then the only possible way and the best means is by cultivating the bodhicitta. It is only through becoming oneself enlightened, then one can give, provide the fullest benefit, fullest help, right? So, the third, repaying the kindness. For example, we say, once mother is blind, and then she is, the example in the text is given, once mother is blind, she is walking on the edge of the mountain, about to fall. She help, right? If you remain indifferent, this is how to say, we call ourselves shameless. We do not recognize her kindness. We do not recognize her kindness. So it's like that. So repaying the kindness. Repaying the kindness. After that, after that, now you develop the love. Love. This is what is called as unconditional love, unbiased love. Again, that's why we say, we can, for the individual person, we can easily develop compassion. For example, if we say before, like for the beggar, for the homeless people, who need help, we can easily, develop compassion. But then for the other people, wealthy people, all these, what are called as millionaires and billionaires, difficult to get compassion. Because we are not able to identify the conditioning suffering, as we said before. Conditioning suffering. They are under conditioning suffering, no matter how rich they are, but still under conditioning suffering, like this. So, love, unconditional love. What is unconditional love? Unconditional love is, we need to make the difference between unconditional love and unconditional compassion. There is difference. Unconditional love means, just wanting to have all sentient beings happiness. You wishing all sentient beings to have happiness. This is the love, unconditional love. And then the next is unconditional compassion. Unconditional compassion is what? Unconditional compassion is wanting all sentient beings to be freed from suffering. Freed from suffering. I just wish. Now it's, of course, very good. Of course, very good. You want all sentient beings to be freed from suffering. Very good. Very nice. But just wishing alone is not enough. That's why His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, make an action. Right? Now after this, after unconditional compassion, next come is what? Next come is what is called as laksan. In Tibetan we call laksan. In English it is translated as resolute intention. Resolute intention. Now this is very courageous. Now this is very, very courageous. The definition of resolute intention is that now in order to get rid, in order to save, or in order to free it, now you again we need to make two different things. Wanting to save and wanting to free it. Wanting to save is more powerful than wanting to free it. Even those Hinayana practitioners, Hinayana, they work for their own self, they work for the achievement of their own, arhat state, cessation, complete liberation. They work for this. They also do have, how beautiful it is. How beautiful it is if I save all sentient beings, if I free all sentient beings from the suffering. But what they are lacking is the wish to save all sentient beings from the suffering. So this only the unique practice of the the unique practice of the Mahayana practitioners. They want not only free sentient beings from the suffering, they have a very strong urge to save all sentient beings from the suffering. Not by a few people. They shoulder I myself alone will do this. So this is a sense of tremendous courage involved, tremendous determination, tremendous courage. I myself alone will do this to save all sentient beings from the tremendous suffering. Now this resolute intention. At that very point, if we are working to realize emptiness, if there is somebody who cultivates this powerful, compassion, and then that person, the same person, if he walks on to realize emptiness, he can penetrate the deepest of emptiness through different various meaning, in the various different ways. For example, I have this compassion. For example, if I have to realize the emptiness of this table, normally my mind is very narrow-minded, very narrow. I only think of one way to establish this emptiness of this table. Once you develop this kind of compassion, your mind is widened, broadened. You can think of this emptiness through many different ways, many different ways. Right? So like this. Yeah.
The result is still the same, right? The result is still the same. The end result is still the same, just different approach.
Again, they're different. Because again, bodhisattva. There are two kinds of bodhisattva. One is less intelligent, one is more intelligent. How they, the process of training in their path is different. For the intelligent bodhisattva, what they do is first they develop both intelligent and less intelligent bodhisattva. First, the rule is same. First they cultivate compassion. This is equal. But then the wise bodhisattva, intelligent bodhisattva, first they develop compassion, and then they develop bodhicitta, and then not bodhicitta. First they develop compassion, and then wisdom later, realize emptiness later, and then bodhicitta. In the less intelligent bodhisattva, first they develop compassion, and then they develop bodhicitta, and then they develop wisdom later. Right? So different. Intelligent, compassion first, same, and then wisdom first, intelligent, bodhicitta later. Less intelligent, bodhicitta come first, wisdom later. Because why? Now let me explain. Intelligent bodhisattva, what they do is, they don't do, Buddha said this, Buddha, the text is saying this. They never do this. The way they analyze is, first they check, first they cultivate bodhicitta, first they cultivate, up to the great compassion they develop. Now up to the great compassion they develop, now is the time to, analyze. They analyze. Can I really liberate sentient beings from the suffering? Can I really, can I really save sentient beings from the tremendous suffering? They do the self, analyze. And while, in the process of analyze, they know, I can save sentient beings from the suffering. How? Because it is possible that the imprints of the self-grasping can be abandoned totally. It is at that very point, it is at that very moment that they can make they are convinced, 100% convinced that enlightenment is possible. Because I can whether we call enlightenment or not, it's finally whether we are able to bring an end to suffering. Bringing an end to suffering is possible when we realize the potential to get rid of the imprints of the self-grasping. So through various reason and logic, they convinced the imprints of the self-grasping can be removed. And then at that very point they develop tremendous courage, determination. Now definitely I will continue to walk because I have confirmed, I have convinced that enlightenment is definitely possible. So then there is no return. Once they are on the path, they will not return back. Oh, I cannot do this. This is beyond my capacity. They never think that way because they have totally confirmed, totally convinced. They now, until achieve enlightenment, they continue to walk. Like this. And then less intelligent bodhisattva, oh, sentient beings are very suffering. Oh, now I need to develop compassion and then develop bodhicitta because I need to, work for the others. So they develop bodhicitta, and then wisdom comes much later. Like this. Okay. Yeah. So then, then resolute intention. Then after that resolute intention, now you develop. Now, although not you develop a bodhicitta, but not exactly bodhicitta. There is something like similar like bodhicitta, similar type. Not exactly bodhicitta, similar type like bodhicitta. First you achieve this, and then you tremendous familiarize with this practice similar to bodhicitta, and then finally you cultivate the naked bodhicitta. And then once we cultivate the naked bodhicitta, we need to take the greatest care of the bodhicitta because there is a danger of degenerating bodhicitta. In the beginner, for the beginner, there is a danger of degenerating bodhicitta if you don't be careful, because there is a danger of self-cherishing involved. Once the strong self-cherishing involved, bodhicitta degenerate. But then, as you practice higher and higher, and then to some stage, it will now never degenerate. Never degenerate. On the path of accumulation, we are three types. On the path of Mahayana path of accumulation, in the accumulation there are three types. The small, the medium. From the medium, you will never degenerate. But in the small, there is a danger of degenerate bodhicitta if one is not be careful of sustaining it.
This is aspiring, right? Aspiring bodhicitta.
But bodhicitta. This is full experience bodhicitta. But also need to be careful because when the flower, plant, when it is growing, you need to take away every care. The sunlight and the temperature, all this is same like this, plant. You need to take. But then when it's growing well, now it's okay. Yes. So then, bodhicitta, the cultivation of the bodhicitta like this. So then you become a bodhisattva. You become the children of the Buddhas. And it says, now, no need to mention about the qualities of, bodhisattva. First, the bodhisattva, even, it says, all the entire Buddhas, filled with joy, and then, it says that the earth shakes, different omens come. And then, it is at that very point, because the color, one of the unique thing is about the Buddha, is here the qualities is measured, Then if you do some prayer, no doubt bring benefit, no doubt. Even you see one who has the layperson vow. We have layperson vow. One we have also the just how to say novice vow, fully ordained vow, vajrayana vow, like these things, right? Now the prayers again, the effective of the prayers also makes different mixed by the vow, the vow. Also, this when we have bodhicitta mind, then definitely it brings, no doubt, it brings benefit. And then one is, then another way of training is, another way of doing this is, equalizing. In order to cultivate bodhicitta, this one is called as equalizing self and others, or exchanging self and others. Equalizing, self and other means just as others want happiness, just as I want happiness, others also want happiness. Just as I do not want suffering, others are same. This kind of thinking. And then exchanging means exchanging the exchanging self and others. That means you exchange. Normally the sender means what? Sender means cherish. We cherish oneself. We cherish ourselves. Others cherish themselves. Now is the turn. You make a turn. Cherishing others more important than cherishing oneself. So you exchange, right? So in order to do that, again you need to do some practice. That means we think about the defects and shortcomings of being self-cherishing, and think more about the advantages, the more advantages of doing, others cherishing others. So this is how we trained in exchanging self and others. Yeah.
Who gave those 7 points?
7 point, actually it comes from Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni transmitted this to Buddha Matriya, right? Buddha Matriya transmitted this to Asanga, Indian Nalanda Master Asanga transmitted this to his brother Vasubandhu, the great old, and then Vasubandhu transmitted this to, finally comes to Adisha. Adisha's lineage is the one which comes also from Manjushri and Matriya, so up to the Tsongkhapa. So both the lineage of extensive and profound lineage, right? Like this. And then here now we read, your own very parents who nurture you with such care, right there, abandoning attachment and aversion, meditate on cherishing others and compassion. Abandoning attachment and aversion, we already discussed about this. Meditate on cherishing others. So this is how we cherish others, because how to do cherish others, and compassion. How to meditate on cherishing others. Now, normally we believe, normally here, for example, not everywhere, we work, right? We work and we get salary, we get income, right? So then we think, I work, I get my salary. But then if you think really deeply, now you become famous. You become famous. Also, why we become due to others' kindness, right? You become famous. Even now, can you, I think, I can almost say, the act of any kind of human, at least has some positive thing. As we said before, all the situation, we cannot say this situation is complete black. We cannot say this situation is complete white. any situation, given situation, there is both positive and negative.
So that's why I have some question earlier. We're talking about the person and the action of that person.
Yeah.
That person is not even, the action is not even harming to me. He's not my enemy. The action is not, that's not any harm to me. But it could have some like very negative to some other sentient being, to some other things. So we can think of, develop a bodhicitta toward himself as because he or she is a sentient being who's once in your past life have been your mother.
Yeah, that's right.
You have compassion toward that person.
Yeah.
But the action is not good.
That's right.
So how do we train ourselves to still have compassion toward that person? But because we cannot condone the action of that person, how do you make yourself so that you don't have this a little bit of hatred or a little bit despise or agitated toward the action of that person?
I see. It's, come.
Can I come in?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So.
So sometimes
I understand.
I have that feeling, toward that person, that he or she does something that is not right to another person or something, and I don't condone that. How do we still keep those, the action and the person as a human being separately, and so not so high.
That's right. So that's why we say, we need to make the, actor and the action, right? We need to make the difference between actor and action. For example, the actor, as an individual, that person want happiness and do not want suffering at all, just like us, The same in wanting happiness and do not want suffering. But then he is also the one who wants happiness, do not want suffering, he becomes the object of compassion. That person deserves the love and the compassion. On the other hand, the action is wrong. That person's action is wrong. So you have, all, you can just how to say, you can, go against the action. You can, go against the action because the action itself is wrong, For example, in one of the Bodhisattva conduct, in one of the 46 Bodhisattva conduct, it says, when someone whose action is wrong, you have to, if you knowingly know this, you have to control it. You have to stop it. If you don't stop it, now you incur the transgression. You have downfall. You create a downfall. That is also understandable now. For example, like Saddam Hussein, right? For example, sometime His Holiness Dalai Lama, you take Saddam Hussein as an example. Saddam Hussein, he is a dictator. Why he become dictator? Who supplied the arms? He alone cannot become a dictator. So there is enough, all the arms for himself to become a dictator, right? So then, as an individual, he wants happiness, do not want suffering. He even, cherish his mother. So it, as a person, we develop compassion. Important thing is, without losing anger, without losing temper, we can, help the person. This is just like, like in Buddhism, it's mostly talks about now there are three kinds of patience, three kinds of patience. Now somebody do something wrong, and then in order to go against that, wrongdoing, we lose temper. So, this creates, problem for that other person. Other person also lose temper, become angry. What is the use? Both sides suffer. Both sides suffer. It's like vicious cycle, And then this is how, people do, harming each other. In the end result, won't be, very, fruitful. So they say, but then on the other hand, you are here and the mad rock coming. Mad rock. We cannot say, I am practicing patience, This is right, Now you can do whatever you need. If you have to go, if you have to run away, that's the best. But the important thing is not let the anger, not to develop anger when the situation which demands action comes. Do not. It's one of the main practices. Not to let the anger. Because the definition of patience. Even the enemy. You say. Normally, what we consider as enemy as someone who bring us, harm, who bring us all the unfortunate things in your life. But then, if we put a little analytical meditation, if we really try to do some analytical meditation, that the so-called enemy, of course, it's very difficult to practice, but still it's worthwhile to make practice, because that person is very grateful that it gives oneself an opportunity to practice patience. By practicing patience, one can create a tremendous amount of merit. like this, So, action and actor, we need to make difference. As far as a person is concerned, the actor is concerned, he is a human being. After all, he is a human being, wanting happiness, do not want suffering. We develop compassion. On the other hand, you have justify that his action is wrong. Wrong is wrong. So, but then without losing anger, without losing temper, we can say your action is wrong. There's no problem. Yeah.
It's so it's come to its calm abiding.
Yeah. Then abandon attachment and aversion. Meditate on cherishing others and compassion. Without allowing the mind to wander, remain in a state of compassion. Without allowing the mind to wander, just then it says one should be mindful of, one should be mindful of, or mindful of the compassion. Remain in the state of compassion. Again, the mindfulness, not only here, mindfulness in every daily life, mindfulness practice is very, very, very important, right? Because we either run in the past, we either in the future. We are not in the present moment, either thinking about the past or in the future. The future has yet to come. Still, we worry about the future. But then, of course, we have plan, we have future planning. We are not saying we should not think about the future. Of course, it's no problem thinking about the future. But too much thinking, no use, right? Too much. And then thinking about the past, the past, of course, the past is past, Again, when something happens, of course, we have also very tendency to think about the past, oh, this person, this, and that person, think about the past, right? So then, it becomes very important to, remain at the present moment. Even, whatever we do, even when we are doing carpeting work, even when we are doing some dance, even when we are praying, always requires mindful, always requires mindful. For example, if you have heard of, one Tibetan master, old Tibetan master, so then, he also in his effort to keep the Tibetan culture, he arranged some dance, and then again he makes sure that people should have mindful even when dancing. Because when dancing, what you are doing, if you don't know, very difficult. If you are mindful of what you are dancing, then very, very good. So like this, mindful of everything. Without allowing the minds to wander. Sometimes, also, we forget, right? We forget, what happened yesterday, what happened a few hours ago, what happened yesterday. Because why we forget is we are not mindful, we have no introspection. Like this. Even attachment and aversion, meditate on cherishing others and compassion. Without losing mindfulness, remain in a state of compassion. Without allowing the mind to wander, remain in a state of compassion. Without losing mindfulness. So here say, without losing mindfulness, remain in a state of compassion. You remain in a state of compassion without losing mindfulness and try to be in a compassion state. Like this. So now we have 12 reached. Next, then I think, next week I will try to finish this all, and then after that, September 2, Rinpoche coming, right?
No, we only have 2 mindful. First is mindful of the who.
Yeah, but I'm going to cover all this later on.
Oh, okay.
But I'm covered because I think. And then after that, the next class I'm going to discuss next week,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
There's 2 classes on next Sunday, right?
On next Sunday we have, on the 2nd September, we have Rinpoche.
No, next week there's class.
Yeah, still next week we have class.
September
And
2nd, we don't have class.
And then other 2, classes, the 2 mindfulness left, I will try to finish by next week.
No, we can take time.
Huh?
We can take time so we can have more detailed explaining.
I see.
Yeah.
If you like, then I can do.
Yeah, it's very important to,
that's
to
right.
understand well.
That's right.
Yeah, because mindfulness is very profound in practice.
Yeah. So it shows you need to remain in a state of compassion. So if you have no question, then we read page 47. Okay. We read. Due to the merit of these virtuous actions, may I truly attain the state of Guru Buddha and let all living beings without exception into their enlightened state. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that has arisen, arise and grow, and may the reason arising not diminish, but increase more and more. May the Supreme Jewel Perfect View that has arise and grow, and may the reason arising not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to these merits, may all beings complete the accumulations of merit and wisdom. May they attain the 2 perfect bodies that arrive from merit and wisdom. May I pacify all the pain of every sentient being who sees or hears me, who thinks of me or touches me. Just like the earth and space itself, and all the other mighty elements, for boundless multitude of beings, may I always be the ground of life, the source of every existence. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I to invite to dispel the suffering of all beings. And thus perfect pure compassionate Gurus, I seek your blessings that overcome deaths, obstacles, and suffering of other beings, may without exception ripen upon me right now, and that I may give my happiness and virtue to others, and thereby bless all beings in peace. May the teaching, the source of happiness, inviting flourish. May all practitioners enjoy good health. May the teachings, the source of happiness for all beings always prevail. The medicine for self-understanding is the true source of all happiness. Is respectful service to the teachings, meditations remain forever. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All power and charity is in your soul. Please remain until samsara ends. 69. Avalokiteshvara, great teacher of objectless. 69. Avalokiteshvara, great teacher of objectless compassion, Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, Sangha, crown jewel of the small and sage, of Sangha, I make request at your feet. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Thai.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very profound teaching.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.